First of all, Shami Chakrabarti, can you explain Labour's policy on freedom of movement as discussed today? Can you explain what it actually is?
I think so. I'll do my best. So the priority is the economy, and we think that at this moment in the negotiations that will come, the priority is trying to get access to the single market. So we don't have an ideological position that's pro or anti-immigration. The priority is the economy. But as Caroline said, the economy has to work for everyone, the people at the top and the people at the bottom. So when you're talking about the impact on the economy, you've got to take care of, yes, of business that wants to have the free movement, but you also need to think about people whose wages are being undercut and about housing and public services and so on.
If it was necessary for the economy to have more immigration rather than less, you would favour that?
Yeah, but only if you do the corresponding thing, which is to make sure that migrant labour can't be exploited, that people's wages aren't undercut, and that you do all the things to ameliorate the impact on people lower down the economic scale, so that free movement isn't something that's just benefiting people at the top but not benefiting people at the bottom who feel that migrant labour is being exploited, that they don't have homes and access to schools and hospitals and so on. The economy has to work for everyone, which is why the stuff about wages fits completely in with this policy. It can't just be about Brexit, it's got to be about what kind of country we want to have after Brexit.
Yes, but we're not necessarily just talking about low wages paid to workers coming in, for example, seasonal workers. We're talking not just about that. We're talking about the impact of low-skilled workers coming into the UK, where there is a whole glut of low-skilled workers. And what you're not saying is that actually there'll be a two-tier system, which is what Caroline Flint wants, which takes high-skilled workers and then, if necessary, low-skilled workers. Jeremy Corbyn is not laying out that. What he is simply saying is he wants to get rid of the undercutting of wages. That is not a comprehensive policy on free movement.
Well, we can't have a comprehensive policy on free movement because we're not currently sitting at the negotiation table.
But you could proselytise one.
Well, I think there has to be a negotiation, and the government's got us into this mess, and the government has no plan whatsoever. What is clear is that the Labour Party will put the economy first, but the economy has to work not just for people at the top, but people at every place.
But you're facing a by-election. You're facing a by-election in Cumbria, and in that by-election, you've got a hard fight. The majority is only 2,500 voters voted to leave. Do you think what Jeremy Corbyn said today would really reassure people who are natural Labour voters?
People in that constituency are worried about the state of their hospital. People in that constituency are worried about the future for their children and their families. They are not anti-immigration in some abstract way. They're not xenophobes. They're not racist. They want to be part of an economy that works for everyone. And that, I think, is what Jeremy's talking about.
They might want fewer immigrants in their community for the very reasons that Caroline Flint was talking about a cultural change. And then you're the one that's saying, you're raising the question of racism.
No, I'm saying that most people that I've ever met in the United Kingdom, regardless of their position on Brexit, are not anti-immigration in some abstract way, are not anti the other in some abstract way. What they want is an economy and a society that works for everyone. And so what that means is that immigration has to serve the economy, but the economy has to be something that we can all share in, which means you don't allow the exploitation of migrant workers. You provide housing for everyone, healthcare for everyone, and you deal with inequality in society.
We'll come on to talk about that in a moment, but I'm quite keen to stick to this point because, you know, what Caroline was saying was that there may be an influx of, there may be a huge amount of migration in a particularly big city, but in other areas, in her local areas, even a small shift can make a massive cultural difference. Do you accept, accept that for some people, that cultural change, that change in their whole world is actually something that's very, very important to them, and that they're worried about being marked out as racist if they even raise it?
Well, I don't think that it is racist to be concerned about the impact of immigration. I think that a lot of people fear the other when the other isn't even in their neighbourhood. But when there is an impact, it is the duty of government to provide the public services, the housing, and to avoid the undercutting of wages. And that is the way to create an economy that works for everyone.
Well, let's move on now to talking for immigration, to Jeremy Corbyn's pronouncement. This first thing this morning, there was to be a wage cap, and he talked about, you know, the footballers earning millions and, you know, bankers and so forth. Did you know he was going to say that this morning?
Jeremy has been talking about inequality in general and wage inequality in particular, probably all his life.
But did you know he was going to announce that he was pro a cap on the Today programme this morning?
I think he was completely, to be honest, I think he was completely authentic, as he's always been.
So he was authentic this morning, but not this afternoon, because he changed the policy by this afternoon. Well,
that's clearly not my reading of it, and you've asked me for my reading rather than the BBC reading of it.
But did you know, this is all I'm saying is that it was a major day for Labour today. Labour was going to be setting out its stall mainly on free movement of people, but really this was Jeremy Corbyn rebooting for the new year, and it starts off with a policy that nobody, I understand, in the shadow cabinet knew was going to happen, or perhaps you did, that he was going to announce that he was for a cap on high pay, which was then reversed this afternoon to be a nuance on the question of ratios.
Well, but listen, that's not my understanding or my reading of it. When you want to deal with wage inequality, you have to deal with it in a number of different sectors, and there are different tools at your disposal. In the public sector...
Footballers?
In the public sector, you could literally say, we are going to cap public sector pay at the top at this amount.
We have a ratio system.
In the private sector, you might look at things like tax incentives and ratios between people at the top of a company and the bottom of the company. The big picture vision and values.
Danny Blanchflower said it was the most lunatic idea. He's a former Monetary Policy Committee member and a former Labour advisor. That was in the middle of the day. By the afternoon, Jeremy Corbyn announced something completely different, which was an extension of the ratios and perhaps tweaking the tax system.
I think that there are different ways that you might approach wage inequality in different sectors. But what is completely clear and completely authentic is that Jeremy is for a more equal Britain, and I think a lot of people in Britain are with him on that.
All during the day today, when Jeremy Corbyn was in Peterborough talking a bit about free movement of people and talking about wage cap, his campaigns director, Simon Fletcher, was tweeting all day about the crisis in the health service. Isn't that extraordinary that actually his campaigns director was tweeting about that, because that perhaps is what people are really concerned with today, and rather than addressing that huge crisis, as I'm sure Labour sees it, in a major speech today, he was saying one thing while his campaigns director was saying another. Wasn't this the perfect opportunity to take the NHS issue on headlong?
That's a conversation about spin, and Jeremy is
it's a conversation about substance.
No, I don't think it is, because we've been doing a great job on the health service. Jonathan Ashworth, the Shadow Health Secretary, has been holding...
This was a major speech, so this actually went well today.
You're saying that Jeremy can't talk about healthcare and inequality and Brexit. Unfortunately, this country is in such a pickle at the moment that it is his responsibility to speak about all of these things.
But
and
do you
everything
think
else
today actually went well?
Well, I actually feel really positive that Jeremy has spoken authentically, and he's spoken from his heart. He's speaking directly to people, and the biggest criticism that you can put to me is that it seems a little bit too unspun.
Hang on, we've got an NHS crisis, there's criticism of the government's Brexit strategy, also the deficit reduction plans are in tatters, Labour sitting at 28%. Does this explain why perhaps it's not getting very, you're not doing very well because days like this happen, which appear kind of going off at cack-handedly?
You're talking to me about spin, but Jeremy spoke from the heart about values and about vision, and I think that if you give him the chance and let him speak directly to his audience, that will go well. And
that'll be Twitter.
That would be Twitter.
Yeah, well,
it's going to be more than Twitter. But we have to speak more directly to people. There's no question.
Well, hang on, because this whole question of wage inequality there's been some developments, and our policy editor Chris Cook's here. Chris.
So, something that came out today from the ONS is an annual data survey. It was slightly poorly timed from Jeremy Corbyn's point of view, because it suggests actually there's been some quite good news on wage inequality in particular. So we have a graph which shows something called the Gini coefficient, which is a measure showing the propensity of inequality within a population. And what we've been drawing on at the moment is just the three major elections, 1979, 1997 and 2010. And what you can see is this gigantic surge in inequality under the Thatcher government, particularly in the late 80s, slow retreat under the Labour government, and then continuing retreat recently. What it shows is actually that over the last, basically since 2007, there's been a roughly £1,600 increase in the wages of the bottom fifth, and a £1,000 or so fall in wages at the top. So inequality has actually been shifting since the financial crisis.
And as you say, Jeremy Corbyn's been talking about this a lot, but presumably then you would give some credit to the Conservative government since 2010 for bringing this inequality down.
The figures that you described, forgive me, are
ONS figures.
Yes, fine, but they are a drop in the ocean for people who can't afford the rail hike, the people who can't leave home in their 20s and buy a home. In real terms, inequality is a gaping chasm in this country, and £1,000 at the top and a couple of £1,000 at the bottom just ain't going to cut it.
Thank you both very much indeed.